that prospect, such as it is, of lasting peace hanging by a thread. Israel's Security Cabinet is supporting Donald Trump's demand for the remaining Israeli hostages to be returned on Saturday. The president made these comments earlier this week.
As far as I'm concerned, if all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off and let hell break out. I'd say they ought to be returned by 12 o'clock on Saturday, and if they're not returned, all of them, not in drips and drabs, not 2 and 1 and 3 and 4 and 2. Saturday at 12 o'clock, and after that, I would say all hell is going to break out.
Well, it's not entirely clear whether the Prime Minister of Israel is demanding the release of all the 76 remaining hostages or just the 3 who were due to be freed on Saturday. We can talk to Anshel Pfeiffer, the Economist's Israel correspondent, who's on the line live from Jerusalem. Anshel, welcome to you.
Good evening, John.
Thank you for joining us, Anshel. Can you just give us your sense of the feeling, the expectation in Israel now? Is that expectation now that this ceasefire is bound to collapse?
Well, we've been hearing for days and weeks now that Netanyahu doesn't really want to go to the next stage of the ceasefire, which, just to put us in clearly in the frame here, we're now still in the first stage of a 6-week truce in which every week hostages were supposed to come out and Israel was supposed to withdraw from parts of Gaza. Hamas announced on Monday that the next stage, the next tranche of 3 hostages supposed to come out this weekend. That's not going to happen. They said that they claimed Israel was in breach of the deal, and that basically is what caused Trump to up the ante and in his comments say, well, you know what, 3 isn't enough. They all have to come out this weekend or hell will break loose.
Yes.
And Netanyahu couldn't be less hawkish than the President of the United States on this issue. And he's also said, okay, if it's not happening, we're going back to war immediately. But as you said, he was vague on what Israel's demand at this point. Is it the 3 original hostages who are supposed to come out? Or is he going along with Trump and saying now they all have to come out? So Netanyahu's been vague, and I think this is mainly playing for time. He has on the one hand his coalition. Many of their members on the far right have been against the ceasefire from the beginning and have been threatening to leave the government if the ceasefire continues. So he's getting a lifeline with them. On the other hand, there's a majority in the Israeli public, and we're seeing it in all the polls, who are demanding that the ceasefire remain so that all the hostages can come out. And there's Donald Trump. Who knows what Trump wants? Trump said now they should all come out. At the same time, Trump pushed through his envoy, Steve Witkoff, for the ceasefire to be signed. So is he still going to insist the ceasefire stays in place if 3 hostages come out as planned, or is he now going to go for everything and give Israel support for going back to the war?
So still we wait to see just what happens, just what is going to happen by noon on Saturday. Now, as you watch every word that Netanyahu utters, Anshel, is it your judgment, your guiding judgment, that the Prime Minister of Israel is looking for a route back to war, having been given, well, Trump's license, in effect?
Netanyahu is playing, first of all, for time in his battle for political survival. If the far right leaves the government, then his chances of surviving, of not having an early election, become very, maybe he'll get from some of the opposition parties some cover for the remainder of the ceasefire deal until the hostages come out. But it means early elections. That's the last thing he wants to see happening. And he has his sights on the bigger things that he thinks Trump can offer, not just this Gaza plan. He wants to be part of some kind of grand alliance that Trump will build with the Saudis. But like I say, he first of all needs to survive, like every politician, every prime minister, until the next day. And he can be voted out at any moment by the Knesset. That's unlikely, but he's always with his eye on survival. So I think now that we've seen this sort of Americanization or Trumpification of the conflict, suddenly Donald Trump is taking ownership of the conflict, and that's a very disorientating moment for all the leaders in the region. We saw this week the King Abdullah of Jordan sitting there in the White House, almost afraid to say anything which would contradict Trump, and everybody's learning how. Everybody's trying to work out how to maneuver. Netanyahu obviously thinks that he did very well last week in his meeting with Trump and that he's fully aligned with Trump, but also he knows that the unpredictability of Donald Trump.
I mean, Angel, just lastly, can you give me your sense of the climate of opinion in Israel? Now, we know, and you've told us that the Prime Minister is under a good deal of pressure from hardline that is in his cabinet. He may well be looking, as it were, to harness this awful crisis to his own political survival. But what about Israelis? I mean, there have been demonstrations that the government should not give up on the hostage deals. How do you judge the balance of opinion?
Well, you mentioned the hostage deal and you mentioned the ceasefire. And for Israelis, in their mind, it's not necessarily the same thing. Even though it is one and the same in the deal, there is a great deal still of anger towards Hamas and Israelis. I think if you were to poll them separately and what should happen with Hamas, they would all say Hamas should be destroyed. If you ask them what should happen with the hostages should all be released in a deal. So there's a lot of contradicting feelings, I think, amongst Israelis. And we see, you can see in the surveys that on the one hand, there is this massive majority of over 60% in favor of the ceasefire. There's also a massive majority in favor of the Trump plan of just emptying Gaza of its population. There isn't like one coherent way of thinking that you can say the majority of Israelis are feeling. Netanyahu himself is deeply unpopular. We have polls saying that only 25% of Israelis still want him to remain as prime minister. But there also isn't currently an election in. We don't have an election date, at least not before October 26th. It's not October 2026. We don't know yet when Israelis will even have a choice to replace Netanyahu. So there's a lot of room that he has there for maneuver. And since Israeli public really has these conflicting feelings with, on the one hand, really desiring so much for the hostages to come out, they've become, their names, their pictures are now familiar to every Israeli. And on the other hand, there's also, I think, also understandable feeling of anger and vengeance toward Hamas for what it did.
All right, Angel Pfeffer from The Economist in Jerusalem. Thank you for joining us, Angel. Now, I want to get the thoughts, if I can, and welcome to the programme, Mustafa Barghouti. Welcome back to the programme, Mustafa Barghouti, who's leader of the Palestinian National Initiative Party. Mustafa, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, John.
Hi. Can I ask you, first of all, for a perspective on the likelihood of the ceasefire failing from the Palestinian side? Do you accept that Hamas stopping the release of hostages on Saturday in the way that they did, that invited Israel to escalate?
No, because the provocator here was Israel, not Hamas. Israel violated the ceasefire agreement in 4 ways. And that's why I am surprised that many people in the Western media are not mentioning that. Israel continued to shoot people during the ceasefire. Up till now, 27 Palestinians were killed and 100 others were injured in Gaza during the ceasefire period. That is unacceptable. Second, Israel obstructed the provision of humanitarian aid that was agreed upon in the agreement, including provision of tents for the people who are displaced. Third, Israel did not send their authorized delegation to discuss the next stage, as should have happened according to the agreement on the 16th day of the agreement. Netanyahu did not send the team and procrastinated. Fourth, Mr. Netanyahu and President Trump are both telling Palestinians, we will have the deal now, get our prisoners back, and then we will continue the war and ethnically cleanse all of you out of Gaza.
Yeah.
These are the factors that are leading to this obstacle. But that doesn't mean that the ceasefire cannot be kept if Israel also is ready to fulfill what is written in the agreement. Nobody is imposing new conditions, neither Hamas nor anybody else.
Yes.
It's about Israel fulfilling what they have signed on. And by the way, let me remind you that Israel is also breaking the agreement with Lebanon, because they have not fulfilled what they signed on, which is the withdrawal of their army from the southern part of Lebanon. I also have to say, I don't think President Trump understands what he's talking about. When he says all hell broke, that means the killing of the 76 Israeli prisoners. Is that what he wants? That the death of these 76 people? I know Netanyahu doesn't care about them, because he cares only about his position. But is that the position of President Trump? Does he understand that breaking the war again means killing these prisoners, the Israeli hostages?
Okay, I clearly understand, Mustafa, that you are intensely critical Israel, of Benjamin Netanyahu, of their conduct of this crisis, and also of Donald Trump. That is as clear as it could possibly be. But your party, the Palestinian National Initiative Party, and you yourself, you do consider Hamas, don't you, to be extremists. But are you endorsing then, given that, are you endorsing the way they're handling their side of this crisis at the moment? Or does it demonstrate the kind of extremism that you have criticized?
No. We don't endorse anything, and we know how to talk to Hamas, and we know what Hamas is about. Of course, we don't agree with Israeli description of Hamas.
But you do consider them to be extremists.
At the end of the day, I am defending the Palestinian people, the poor people in Gaza who will be slaughtered again. The people of Gaza who were subjected to genocide. The 17,000 children in Gaza who were killed by Israel are not Hamas, are not fighters. These were children. The pregnant women that were killed were not Hamas. This is what Israel did in Gaza is a combination of 3 war crimes: genocide, collective punishment, and ethnic cleansing, and that should not be allowed.
Tell me, how much, tell me this, Mustafa, how much support does, not your party, you are critical of Hamas, how much support does Hamas have now among the Palestinians of Gaza as you see it?
I think Hamas has a certain support, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. But I know also that all the polls that have been done in the occupied territories show that neither Hamas nor Fatah can have absolute majority if we have elections. And by the way, I think had we have democratic elections in 2021, which Israel obstructed, and which the United States did not support, we would not have had 7th of October, because that would have provided for a resolution of internal Palestinian issues, the creation of a democratic structure that would be pluralistic, and Hamas would have accepted a government that is elected. Now we have an agreement in Beijing which says that we could have a national consensus government, mainly consisting of independent people, and Hamas does not want to be in the government. But the mediators told me, they asked Israel, do you accept Hamas? No. Do you accept Fatah? No. Do you accept the Palestinian Authority to rule Gaza? No. Do you accept a national consensus independent government? No. What does Israel want? The elimination of the presence of Palestinian people. And what Mr. Trump did, another big mistake. He advocated another war crime of annexing the occupied West Bank to Israel. Okay. How could that be?
Indeed, and I mean, again, strong views which you've shared with us, aired with us in the past. As ever, it is helpful to have you on the program. Can I ask you just in a word? Do you believe it is now pretty much inevitable the ceasefire will collapse and we will return to war in Gaza?
70% it will stay. I hope it will stay. We'll do everything we can to sustain it, because we don't want anybody to be killed.